In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry looks into the mirror of Erised and sees his parents, who died when he was a baby. He longed for what he could no longer have. When Ron looked into the mirror, he saw the potential successful future he always wanted, but couldn't quite seem to get. Our past is memory, present fleeting, and our future is full of expectations and desires. Grief is realizing what we saw for our future no longer exists. That mirror has shattered, and we need some help to clean up the pieces. In March of 2016, my mother died of complications of pneumonia and the flu. One day, I was on the phone with her talking about my day at work, and the next, she was in a coma. Less than a week later, I was planning her funeral, writing a eulogy, and helping my dad and my sister figure out a new normal. Simple things like what the passwords were, or how to use a debit card because my mom ran the house finances. About 100 days later, we lost my Vavu, my grandfather. And as the oldest of his 12 grandkids, I gave the eulogy for him as well, twice. Once down here for immediate family, and once in Canada where he lived. About 15 months or so later, while I was celebrating a wedding in North Carolina in October of 2017, I got a phone call. My father had been hit by a driver on the highway while he was riding his motorcycle. I flew home with this sense of dread that it was happening all over again. A day later, surrounded by friends and family and his police department colleagues, he died. I spent the next few weeks figuring out the logistics of a 1,000-person wake, writing and giving a third eulogy, this time being broadcast all over the news and radio. And then having to manage a court case that would happen about a year later to manage the accident. My life was in shambles, and it was totally upside down, and I needed some help. In my professional life, I've worked in university housing for about the last 10 years or so, and I thought I had it figured out. I worked with students at some of their lowest times: suicide ideation, attempts, sexual assaults, thefts, deaths of loved ones. I sat with them when they cried. I delivered news no one wants to hear. And I was praised for my empathy and kindness in my response, but none of that could have prepared me for how grief can truly change a life. We don't live alone. So why is it we feel we have to grieve alone? We always push our emotions to the side. We put our head down and get through it. When someone asks us how we're doing, our gut response is to say, "I'm fine, thanks, how are you?" Right? Without batting an eye. What if we actually told the truth? What if we weren't afraid of making people feel uncomfortable with our imperfections? What if we asked for help? Now, that makes me so uncomfortable because I was the kid that the night before I started kindergarten, I was having night terrors because I didn't already know how to read. I hate failing people, and I hate needing to ask for help from anyone. But what's the point of having a support network if we don't use it? Using it and how we do so can actually determine our long-term health. A study conducted in 2019 recognized the connection between the neurology and psychology of grief, noting that brain matter can actually shrink if we don't manage grief in a timely manner. Also realizing that there were higher levels of morbidity when people didn't use their support systems in a timely manner enough. So clearly we have some work to do in helping other people managing what's going on in their lives. And I kept thinking of how we could do this better. And through my education and training in psychology and crisis response, the same themes kept coming up. I'm going to walk you through an acronym to help people going through change and loss. In my professional life, I talk about my approach to my work as leading with empathy and backing it up with systems and procedures. So welcome to the Clean It Up system of grief support. First is C, connect. Outreach and connection don't happen overnight, and sometimes we gotta put our egos aside. What if they don't take my call? What if they don't like what I'm trying to do for them? That doesn't matter. Sometimes it's the smallest day-to-day things that can truly make an impact. For example, after my mom died, I was obviously struggling. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, and I had some friends that asked if they could come over a day or two after she died. They asked what I needed. I said, okay, I need double-sided tape for the picture boards and orange Gatorade because I hadn't been eating. A few hours later, I woke up on the couch and saw them talking in the kitchen with my sister, and I immediately felt a sense of relief, knowing that they were just there. 5 years later, and that's the effort I still remember. I grew up in a very large Portuguese Catholic family, and when someone close to us passes, a traditional wake is held. I hate wakes. To me, they go against any real, authentic connection. For those attending, of course, it's a time for them to say goodbye, but that's kind of where it ends. They go through the line, sorry for your loss, and then they move on. When 1,000 people came to my father's wake, I felt like I was saying thank you to one person while reaching for the hand of the next. The line was moving too fast. It was a conveyor belt of missed connections. All of the sentiments and hugs and well wishes coming my way, it wasn't helping, and it didn't make me feel safe or grounded or secure. Maslow's hierarchy of needs gives us a visual of what's needed most in life, starting with the physiological things like food and water and shelter, before community and belonging can become essential. So all that connection coming my way was too much for me to handle because I felt that like those basic needs hadn't been met yet. Connection can be authentic if we focus on those needs first, and then we move over to those wants. To do that, sometimes we just need to stick around long enough to be a consistent support network for someone, and stick around. Next up is L, listen. Self-explanatory, right? But how often do we listen to respond rather than just to simply listen? Our nature is to be storytellers. Our histories are written through the sharing of our lived experiences. But we don't need to share a similar story all the time. If someone lost their job and they're worried about where they'll pay their next bill, they don't need to hear something similar. Listen to them. React to the emotion that is being carried in their voice. We need to listen for those cues. Otherwise, what's the point of listening at all? We need to listen for what they actually need. There's a psychological concept called diffusion of responsibility. It basically means that when you're in a large group of people, you're less likely to take action when you see something going on. For example, when you drive by an accident and you don't call 911, or you see someone drop their papers on the ground and you figured the next person will come and help them. What if you apply that to someone in your life who has gone through change or loss? Have you ever assumed that someone closer to them would be the one to help, or they're strong enough to handle it on their own, right? You may have just diffused the responsibility of being in that person's support network. We need to make sure we're listening to the impact of the words that are being said and not skip over them or make assumptions. Next up is E, empathize. For the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has shook us to the core of who we thought we were. For the first time in a long time, we have a connection to all of our neighbors and have a little bit of a sense of what they're going through. When we don't have that level of common ground, though, we need to focus on the emotion of what's being said rather than just what is being said itself. That must be really hard for you. I can tell you're angry at what happened. After my father died, I recognized that I needed to be more vocal about how things were affecting me, so I decided to share and be more open. Some people were gracious and kind and lovely and had patience, and some just couldn't get past that we didn't have that common ground. One person said, "You know what? I just wouldn't care if the same thing happened to me. I'm just not close with family." That was hard. I lost a lot of trust, and I was hurt. And I needed to recognize that some people weren't going to be in my corner. What hurt was that I wasn't able to then keep trying to connect. That can hurt people's own developmental process in their grieving. And we want to avoid that. We need to focus on what makes us similar. My favorite singer is Sarah Bareilles, and her music over the years has helped me through some of the darkest times in my life. She helped me feel not alone when I went through a college breakup, or made me feel strong in my vulnerability, or she helped me write a eulogy full of sadness and still find the light in it. Her song Orpheus to me is the definition of empathy when people are dealing with hard times. She sings, "That's how it works. When the bottom drops out and you learn we're all just hunters seeking solid ground." She goes on to sing, "If the bottom drops out, I hope my love is somebody else's solid ground." God, that's beautiful. We're all in the same boat. We all rise and fall with each lived experience. Sometimes we're falling. And sometimes we're the solid ground someone else is falling towards and desperately needs. Next is accept, A. The most traditional emotion that we think of when we think of people grieving is sadness, right? But I think we all recognize that there's a myriad of other emotions that come with it. Anger, impulsivity, withdrawal, denial, etc. The steps earlier in the acronym still apply, though, if someone's reaction to what they're going through isn't exactly what we thought it was going to be. After my mom died, I was struggling with socializing, and a friend took me out and sat me down and told me that if I had done a better job of staying connected to her prior to my mother dying, that I would have got to tell her directly that she had passed rather than her having to hear from someone else. I was a little frustrated. She was expecting a normal situation and a normal response in something that wasn't normal at all. In my work in student affairs, we work with theoretical frameworks to help guide us, recognizing and helping students with their problem solving and skill building. One of those is Arthur Chickering's Vectors of Identity Development. We use this to showcase the progression of students from dependence to true independence and critical thinking. Now, why is this relevant? I'm able to find solutions to students' problems based on where they're at in these systems. A student that's an incoming first-year freshman is not going to have the same level of independence or critical thinking as an outgoing senior or master's level student. So I meet them where they're at, and I help them find solutions there. When we apply that to someone who's grieving, a child is going to react differently than an adult when they lose something. A 20-something is going to react differently than someone in their 50s, and so on. We need to listen to where they're at in their own process. We cannot blame, we cannot judge. We end with N, normalize. And this starts at home and ends with our larger systems and cultures. When I was about 10, my grandmother, died of cancer. My mom, before she died, brought me to the public library where they had these little suitcases in the kids section filled with books on the same topic. So 10-year-old me walks out of the library with a bunch of books on death and dying. My mom sat me down and told me what was happening and told me it was okay to be sad and to ask questions. She normalized it. And she got ahead of it so I could have the language needed to express myself and my emotions. I'm so thankful for that because now I can help other people during trying times, and I can help myself, and I have. It's clearly made that impact. When we look globally, and specifically this country, I think we can do a much better job of systemically helping those who are going through grief. In a Business Insider article conducted in 2020, what we saw is that on average, our businesses give about 3 days or so of bereavement leave, typically with restrictions on who people can grieve for that time. But nationally, the mandate doesn't necessitate any days of bereavement. It's not needed at all. So businesses can restrict how long and for whom we grieve. When the CEO of Facebook, Sheryl Sandberg's father died, she recognized this as an issue and adopted a much more inclusive bereavement policy for her company. When my dad died, I had to manage the funeral. I had to meet with city employees and lawyers and get my house into my name. That wasn't happening in 3 days. I had to use vacation for the rest of the time, and that was not a vacation. And that definitely wasn't restful. And I wasn't ready to go back to work that soon. What we need to do is recognize the impact we have of normalizing the emotions we have in society to better support people, not only in grief, but in any part of their lives. The ones grieving are the ones holding the broom. They're the ones doing the heavy lifting. They just need someone to hold the dustpan along the way. What you need is a little bit of help. And I invite you to close your eyes, as I invite you to think of your future looking in the mirror. What you saw for your future is shattered. Those expectations broken. And what you need is for someone to hold out a hand, to say that they'll help you and that you're not alone, and that they'll help you clean it up. Once we clean it up, we can start to move forward. And then people can begin again. Thank you.